Hey, welcome into the Shopfix channel, a community joined together for the love of woodworking. In this episode, I want to show you how I built this farmhouse coffee table from start to finish. And there's actually free plans for this build in the description below. I have a SketchUp program document in which you can actually pull this up on your computer and mess around with the plans. And then I also have a printable version that you can print out and work with in your shop. And so in this video, I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks on how to get this project done. So let's get right into this build.
Shopfix. It's for the love of woodworking. This project all started out with some reclaimed 2x4s that I found from a basement demolition, and I got them for free. Through the initial milling process, I was able to clean these 2x4s up real nice. But for the project, I'm going to be milling these a little bit further, so in step 1, we're going to mill these 2x4 frame pieces to their final dimensions for the project. To ensure that all of my 2x4 frame pieces fit uniformly, I'm going to be milling them all down to 1 3/8 inch. Afterwards, I headed over to the joiner to get one straight edge on each of these 2x4 boards. Now that we have a straight edge jointed on each of these 2x4 boards, it'll be time to rip these out to their final width on the table saw. To enable all these 2x4s to fit flush with one another, I'm going to go ahead and rip them all out at 3 inches. Make sure that the straight edge you cut out on the jointer is resting against the table saw fence. The top frame boards will be ripped to a 2-inch width. Be mindful that you're saving the best part of the wood as you're ripping these top frame boards out, and this is a good chance to remove any knots in the wood. With the frame boards properly milled, in step 2, we're going to be cutting the rabbets into the frame boards so we can inlay slats to create the tabletop and the bottom shelf. Alright, so we'll go ahead and cut out the top frame boards first, and they have a 5/8 by 5/8 rabbet, and I simply measured that on the side of the board and made sure all the boards were going to be cut out in the exact same way. So to cut out this rabbet on the table saw properly, the height of the blade needs to match the 5/8 measurement on the side of the board, and you also have to align the blade with the fence at 5/8 as well. Since this table saw cut is resting in the middle of the board, you're going to want to make sure that your riving knife is set for a non-through cut, which is in the lower position. Now we need to lay this piece of lumber on its side to cut out the next 5/8 measurement. For this rabbet cut, we'll leave the blade exactly as we positioned it before at 5/8, and we need to ensure that the blade is coming in contact with the previous rabbet cut. This cut will dislodge a sizable portion of the wood in the corner where you created the rabbet. Now we have all of the rabbets cut out in our top frame boards. The bottom frame pieces in this coffee table have a little bit larger of a rabbet, however the steps are the exact same. First, we need to match the blade's height with the depth of the rabbet, which is 1 5/8 inch. Then we need to match the table saw fence to cut out the width of the rabbet cut, which is 5/8 inch. The riving knife still needs to be set in a non-through cut position, and for safety purposes, make sure that your fingers aren't pushing the wood through on the backside as the blade comes out of the piece of wood. To finish this rabbet, we'll lay the boards on their side, and then we need to match the blade height to 5/8 inch. Then we'll adjust our table saw fence to cut out the 1 5/8 inch width. This rabbet cut will dislodge that sizable piece in the corner, and we'll want to make sure that our push stick doesn't come in contact with the blade. Now we have all of our rabbets cut out on these top frame boards, and it's going to make the joinery a piece of cake for the next steps of the project. In the third step, we'll take our 2-inch width boards to create and glue the rectangular top frame of this farmhouse coffee table. First, we'll need to cut 45-degree miters in all of our top frame boards. So we'll adjust our miter saw to 45 degrees and cross-cut a 45-degree angle in each of the 4 top frame boards. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the short sides of the top frame first. So from the tip of the 45-degree miter, it's 26 3/4 inches long, and you'll see how I measured that out at a 45-degree angle on the board. Now we can use that 45-degree reference line on the board to align the miter saw blade for this cut. Once we have the miter saw blade correctly positioned, we'll take a stop block to make sure that the next frame board that we cut out will be the exact same length as this one. With the first frame board properly cut out, we can simply slide the next frame board right up against that stop block and it'll be the exact measurement. I use that exact same process to cut out the long side of the top frame boards, and these are cut out at 38 3/4 inches. We'll use the stop block again to make sure that the long side frame boards are the exact same measurement. Now it's time to assemble the top frame boards and ensure that they're fitting properly. With proper milling and accurate miter saw cuts, you can get some pretty perfect corners. All that's left to do is to glue these frame boards together, and I'll be utilizing a band clamp for this glue up. After applying a coat of glue on one side of each of these 45-degree joints, I was able to put them all together and tighten down my band clamp to finish this top frame glue up. In the fourth step, we're going to be properly milling and gluing the slats onto the top frame. So I had a little extra fun with these slats because I actually created them out of 2x4s, so I got to do some resawing on this project. I used a center marking jig to mark the center of these 2x4s, and then I was able to head over to the bandsaw to get these resawed. So this project calls for 5/8 inch thick slats for the top frame and the bottom frame to create the tabletop and the bottom shelf. And of course, I didn't want to go out and buy new 5/8 material, so I simply made 5/8 boards out of my 2x4 reclaimed lumber. So after creating a uniform thickness of 5/8 on my D-wall planer, I headed over to my joiner to create one straight edge before ripping these out on the table saw. After joining one edge square, I ripped these out on the table saw to their final width. Then I was able to cross cut these at their final length, which is 37 1/4 inch. Before cross cutting all these boards to their final length, I recommend doing a test fit. With a successful test fit, you can simply use your stop block to cross cut the rest of these top frame slats. With the top frame slats properly milled and cut out to their final length, we'll glue the edge of each of the slats together, and we'll also glue the ends of the boards to the rabbeted edge of the top frame. With all those steps taken, we now have the top of this coffee table all complete. In the fifth step, we'll be attaching the legs onto the top frame. Before we can attach these legs onto the top frame, we'll first need to chisel away any dry glue that's present in the corners of the top frame. Once the dry glue from the corners has been chiseled away, the legs will sit flush to the top frame. Now all we have to do is glue the legs onto the top frame in the corner, and I simply applied some glue, spread it around with my finger, and I was easily able to place the leg into the corner, and then I used two F-style clamps to apply equal pressure to both sides of the leg board. One important thing to note here is that the leg board doesn't need to rest flush against the bottom of the tabletop. It needs to rest flush against the sides of the top frame, and that's how you know it's going to be a perfect 90-degree angle. Another thing I'd like to note is that I believe glue is sufficient enough to hold these legs together. There's no need to drive in any screws. Now that the coffee table's legs are securely attached, in the sixth step we'll be creating the bottom frame of this coffee table with Kreg jig joints. The bottom frame structure begins 3 inches from the bottom of the coffee table, so that's what I'm measuring out here. I recommend transferring this line over the entire width of the board so that it's much easier to align your bottom frame pieces onto these legs. I'm using a Kreg jig K4 set at 1 3/8 inch to drill out the pocket holes for this joinery. And I'll simply be drilling out a pocket hole on the left and the right side of both ends of these boards. These bottom frame pieces are 3 inches in width and 21 1/4 inch in length. To securely mount these boards onto the legs, I clamp them to the reference line that I previously drew out at 3 inches. Then I'll take my drill with the Kreg jig square bit attached and mount 2-inch coarse threaded screws into these pocket holes. I would highly recommend not using an impact driver to drive in Kreg jig screws. Now that those two bottom frame pieces are securely mounted, we'll work on attaching the bottom frame pieces with the rabbeted edge. We'll set the Kreg jig up at 1 3/8 inch for the side that doesn't have the rabbet. Then we'll flip the board over to the rabbeted edge side and we'll set our Kreg jig up at 3/4 inch. Once we've drilled the proper Kreg jig holes, we can clamp these boards to our coffee table and begin securely mounting them with Kreg jig screws. Although these pocket holes were drilled out at different depths, since we're going to be mounting these screws into the same thickness of material, we can use the same length screw on both sides of this board, which is 2 inches. Well, once we have our Kreg jig screws properly mounted into these pocket holes, we'll have our bottom frame completely done. In the 7th step, we'll be gluing the bottom frame slats into the rabbeted edge, much like we did the top frame. However, these bottom frame slats are orientated widthwise, whereas the top frame slats are orientated lengthwise. These slats are cut at a 3-inch width and a 21 1/4 inch length. After the glue has had plenty of time to dry, we can go ahead and take a chisel to chisel away any dried glue on the top of the wood surface. And I highly recommend removing glue squeeze out in this way, as it's much easier than trying to sand after you've wiped the glue away. Alright, now it's time for the 8th step, which is to create these awesome X-style end caps. First, you'll want to position your miter saw at 30 degrees. After cross-cutting one end at 30 degrees, we'll take it over to our coffee table to get the other side measured out. To measure this out, you simply put the end of the 30-degree angle flush against the side of the leg, and then you can get that measurement. You'll simply want to cut this to fit, so I would recommend cutting it once or twice, seeing how it fits, and then eventually you'll get a final fit. To mount this X securely onto the coffee table, you'll simply want to apply glue to both ends and then slide it from the backside into position, and then apply pressure to both ends until it has a nice snug fit against the legs. We'll repeat that process to the opposite side of this X, but we'll also place glue in the middle of the board to make a stronger fit. And then once the glue is fully dried, we can use a chisel to chisel away any dry glue squeeze out. Well, with the X's complete, we can move on to sanding the project, and we'll want to sand from a 60 grit to a 220 grit. Although I sanded every surface of this coffee table before finishing, the main focus was definitely the tabletop because I wanted to make sure there wasn't any rough edges between any of the pine boards. Well, last but certainly not least, in step 10, we're going to stain and finish this farmhouse coffee table. So I really wanted to achieve a nice contrast between white paint and dark stain, so first I painted all the trim white. Afterwards, I stained with Minwax's mocha color, and I also applied a top coat of clear gloss polyurethane, and this was the final result. I really liked how this farmhouse coffee table came out, and I was so glad that I spent the extra time to finish it the way I did. If you enjoyed this build, don't forget to grab those free plans in the description below. Well, that about wraps up this project, but I really hope you enjoyed the tips and tricks within this woodworking tutorial, and if you did, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the Shopfix channel. See you next time.